My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the RECO12 Speaker Meeting podcast. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I am living in the relative happy, joyous, and free that is promised to those living in recovery, and have been very active in the rooms of recovery since September of 2013. Welcome to RECO12. We are an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds, and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. Speakers from our past meetings have represented many fellowships and identify with addictions with such variety as alcoholism, drugs, food, sex, gambling, theft, codependency, and all of the anon groups. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of that speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. If you are hearing this meeting in recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to RECO12.com, that's RECO12.com, to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations. RECO12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. We gratefully accept contributions. I'll put a link to that in the chat of the live meeting, as well as in the show notes of the podcast if you would like to contribute. This last week, we received several reviews in Apple Podcasts, and thank you all so much for sharing your experience so that others can gain awareness of RECO12 and what we are striving to do in sharing this message with the person who still suffers. Dan3939 shared the following in their review. RECO12 has brought peace and serenity to my life as I have had the chance to listen to its episodes. The one with Father Bill W. on two-way prayer was especially enlightening for me. But I love knowing that I can turn to any of these podcasts when I have some time and when I need to connect with my higher power. Thank you, Dan3939. We look forward each week to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Al N., whose chosen topic is what happens when the formal work is done. And here's a little bit about Al in his own words. He says, I came into AA in January and February of 1974 and have been sober since. I came into recovery from compulsive sexual behavior in both SA and SAA at the same time in October of 1994. After 3 years, I took a sabbatical to do some field research, relapse, but have been sober since January 15th, 1998. After weighing the pros and cons of my personal needs, SAA is the program that fit best for me and is my home program. I currently attend the ARP program for maintenance, and I sponsor extensively and make many contributions at the international level. Al, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Justin. And good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. But welcome to all of you 12-steppers out there. This morning, I rather than tell you a whole lot of war stories about my life, I thought I would take the approach of talking a little bit about what happens afterward and what a recovery looks like maybe when we're a couple of years down the road. Perhaps some of you are working with sponsees who are a couple of years down the road, and you kind of wonder, now they're abstinent from whatever their choice is, what does life look like for them? So I have some questions today, and they're just kind of gray matter probes to have you think about exactly what goes on when we're a ways down the road in our recovery, things that will help us to stay in recovery and to stay sober. So let me begin with the first question. Are you a possibility thinker? Do you think about possibilities in your daily life, in your recovery? Some years ago, I listened to Dr. Robert Schuller from the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California, talk about being a possibility person. And his discourses for a year were about being a possibility thinker. And I walked away from that experience thinking, I really need to look at the possibilities in my life day by day if I'm going to maintain my sobriety. As Albert Einstein said that man possesses 2% of the intelligence in the universe. what is the possibility that God exists in the other 98%? I think about that and think about possibilities. And so we all talk about God or our higher power in our program. And as we go down the road in recovery, after we've done our formal work, what is our relationship with our higher power? Have we developed a personal relationship with that person or thing that we call a higher power? And how do we sustain that? So I think that's important. So looking at our recovery and on a daily basis and saying, what are the possibilities for today, and understanding that, perhaps that's part of your step 2. Second question, can you be captivated by an idea to which the future belongs? Can you be captivated by an idea to which the future belongs? It was Victor Hugo that said, the most powerful thing in the world is an idea whose time has come. And you say, well, give me an example. June 10th, 1935, 87 years ago, a couple of drunks got together and they decided they didn't want to drink anymore. And how were they going to do that? And so William Wilson and Dr. Robert Smith, better known as Bill W., and Dr. Bob got together and discovered that if they could support each other, they would be able to stop drinking. But the question was, how do we do that and how do we maintain it? I won't go into the great history of the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous. Many of you probably know the history. But in any event, the idea that came out of that relationship was the 12 steps. This was an idea to which the future belongs. Here we are 87 years later in various disciplines, recovering from whatever your choice is, and we do that with the 12 steps. The 12 steps were an idea, and their time came, and we live in that idea now. 12 steps are the basis of virtually any addiction type, recovery type program, and throughout the world, this is an idea that has spawned great things, the miracle of recovery. I think it was Patrick Carnes said that eventually, when we look back on the history of the world, one of the greatest things that ever happened in the world was the idea of the 12 steps. It's changed lives. And we who are in recovery know a great deal about that. Next question, do you have a wholesome, positive attitude toward life, toward your recovery, toward your family, toward your friendships? Having a wholesome, positive attitude. I like to be around people who are wholesome, who are positive. Where do I find that? I always go to meetings and pan for gold. I love the experience, strength, and hope that people share in meetings. And I like to be around people who are succeeding in recovery. And what I want to know is, how do you do that? That's what I'm there to steal. And so I've just met some tremendous people who are very successful people. We don't measure that success in dollars and cents and the size of your house and where you live in the city and so on and so forth. We celebrate that miracle, if you will, of having a wholesome, positive attitude in recovery. Let me tell you a brief story, and I'll try and do this without much emotion. I'm an emotional person. I'm easy to tears, but let me give you an example. Several years ago, I attended the high school graduation ceremony for my daughter. And her cousin, my niece, also graduated at the same time. So we were in a building known as the Jubilee Auditorium here in Calgary. It seats about 7,000 people. And so this particular high school, was a big one. So this is a big production of doing the grad thing. Probably you've been to a few of them. And as you know, they call out the name. Somebody trots across the stage, picks up their scroll, and away they go. And often they do it alphabetically. And so my niece's name began with an M. And as you know, my last name begins with an N. So we were quite a ways down the list. And the thing that was interesting, maybe you know from your own graduation or the ones that you've been to, you can always tell who's popular. You can tell who the jocks are. You can tell who the good-looking gals are, because those are the ones that get the whistles and the hoots and the shouts. And if you're an average type guy, you get the polite clap as you go across the stage. And so as we're sitting there and watching the events, they called out a name. This is where it gets emotional for me. That building, and the people just jumped up and shouted and roared, and there was confetti going everywhere. And I thought, wow, I've got to see who this person is. I stood up to see what was going on. There was a girl in a wheelchair who has cerebral palsy. She was told that she would never graduate from school. And yet here she was, going across the stage to pick up her graduation scroll. I talked to my daughter a little bit about her afterwards. My daughter was in a peer leadership program at school. And this particular girl with cerebral palsy was one that my daughter had worked with a little bit in school. And she said, Dad, this girl begins her day with a new horizon, a new challenge, a new beginning. And those are things that are not easy for her. A new horizon, a new challenge, a new beginning. Do we in recovery start our day that way? Do we have a new horizon for each day? Do we face a new challenge? And will we have a new beginning in recovery? Even when we're years down the road in our recovery, do we keep it fresh? I live in an apartment building. There's a lady in this building who has cerebral palsy. She walks with a walker and has difficulty with her legs, but she can walk. And I'm always amazed at the tenacity of will that this woman has each and every day. My apartment overlooks a huge patio, and we have flower beds and we have gardening boxes, and she's out there every day working on the box, and it would be so easy for her to just kind of hang around her apartment and say, wow, I'm defeated. I just can't do this. And so I just by watching her out on the patio, I take courage in her new horizon, her new challenge, and her new beginning every day. And I'm blessed as I do that. Another question, do you have a self fit to live with, fit for yourself to know? I don't know about you, but back in the day when I was an addict, some people might have questioned that. Did I have a self fit to live with, fit for myself to know? Addiction is the art of escape. What did we escape from back in the day? It's probably been many and varied. And, when we do step forward and we look at our character defects and the things that have happened, what were we running from? More often we were running from fear and a difficult life, and we just didn't know how to cope and how to manage. And so our addiction became the art of our escape. So one of the questions I like to ask myself today, even many years down the road after recovery, who am I today? Am I still that grateful, recovering sex addict? Am I still using step 12 to carry the message? Am I still promoting the 12-step program? Am I still reaching out to help the addict who still suffers? Well, I could sit at home because I'm retired. I could contemplate the lint in my belly button and say, I'm sober today, so I'll skip down the yellow brick road singing Kumbaya. But, I have something to give. I have to pay it forward. And I'm so grateful to be able to do that. And so each day I ask myself the question, do I have a self fit to live with, fit for myself to know? I'm couched in recovery. I believe I am. And I hope that wish is true for you as well. Let me ask you the last question here. Do you have a philosophy fit to live by? What is your personal philosophy? Do you have a philosophy fit to live by? We say, yeah, hey, I'm recovering. I'm in so-and-so program and I'm sober today. And so I think I have a good philosophy. I'm one of those people that says, sobriety is the number of days that we've been able to chain together where we haven't acted out in our outer circle or in the things that we've done in the past. And so I often say to my sponsees, tell me about the quality of your recovery. The quality of your recovery. How does it look each day? And do you have a personal philosophy, one that's fit to live with and one that's fit to live by? We can work on that constantly in the days of our recovery, in just having that philosophy and refining it. I'm big on 10-4, good buddy. Step 10 and step 4. I know my character defects, and we talk in the steps about having the God of our understanding take those character defects away. And so I always question in meetings, does God actually take those away? I've still got mine. They still pop up periodically. But now I have a plan. I know what to do. I have a relapse prevention plan or a self-management plan. Have you ever developed one of those for yourself? It's kind of interesting because some of the people I've worked with over the years, this is a value-added thing that I do as a sponsor. I have them develop a self-management plan. And some of my guys, in fact, have written down some brief notes, put it on a card, and put it in their wallet. When the poop hits the fan, what do? Well, do you know what to do when somebody hollers fire? Get out of the building. When you're triggered, get out of the building. Somebody hollered fire. So there's a whole plan of things that can happen from there that will help to keep you sober. And I think most of you probably know in part what that plan looks like. So having a philosophy, my philosophy is that I am able to deal with my sexual addiction if I will dedicate myself, if I am committed to the program, if I work the steps, if I stay in touch with my sponsor. I have 2 of them. Here I am, years and years later, I still have 2 sponsors. I still reach out to them. We've got some guys in the room today who are some of my sponsees. I can't see your names and faces, but I know you're there. And, these are guys that I can reach out to, and I do at various times. I mean, as sober for as long as I've been sober, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that I will stay. So I have days. I have days when the poop hits the fan. I have days when I get up in the morning, I say, wow, I've got arthritis in my hips. And some days I'm in so much pain that, I'm sure acting out would cure that for me. Let me get the one-click thing out here and we'll look at some pornography. I'm sure that's the cure for arthritis. Well, many years in recovery have told me that that's not the case. So I've developed a philosophy that I think works for me, and I hope that works for you as well, that you can do those things. So in the work that you do beyond the 12 steps and in your daily life, be a possibility thinker. Be captivated by ideas. Have a wholesome, positive attitude. Have a self fit to live with, fit for yourself to know, and have a philosophy fit to live by. Let me close with this thought. It's from Edward Everett Hale. It says, I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And what I can do, that I ought to do. And what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I will do. May you be blessed in your recovery and in the work that you do with yourself and with others. And I hope in some small way I've given you something to think about today as you work and progress in your recovery. Thank you for letting me share.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Al. Really appreciate your share there. And I love those questions that you posed. And I'll have some questions for you based on those questions. But before we get to that, I want to remind our live audience that if you have questions for Al, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. Looks like 2 speech bubbles over the top of each other. And we'll get to those and ask him so that he can share a little bit more of his experience, strength, and hope based on those questions. So, Al, before we move forward, tell us a little bit about your primary recovery fellowship and how that helps you. We aren't promoting, but we are sharing how that helps us in our own recovery. And please let us know how that works for you, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, my program of choice, of course, for recovering from sex addiction is Sex Addicts Anonymous. When I came into recovery, I did both Sexaholics Anonymous, SA, and I did SAA as well, Sex Addicts Anonymous. And after about a year, my circumstances were such that SAA worked for me. So I have always said that a person needs to be in the program that works for them. And there's more than one way to recover from virtually any addiction. There are many programs out there. And so I took the time to do some investigative work to see what the programs were about, what their philosophy was. And obviously, every program is based on the 12 steps. The approach may be a little bit different and may vary from program to program. But for me, SAA was the one that worked and the one that has been able to keep me sober. And so that's my home group. I am also, my community of faith also has a recovery program. And I'm very involved in that one as well. And for me, after this many years, it's a maintenance program. But my friend, as sober as I have been, I still do 2 meetings a week. And that's what it takes to keep Al sober. I can't afford to skip them. So I'm very faithful in my meeting attendance. And that's a little bit about what I'm associated with.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing about, what it takes to keep Al sober. I appreciate that. All right, we have a couple questions that have come in, and I've got some more. Keep bringing those questions. Kevin asks, you often mention about the quality of one's recovery. Can you please elaborate on what you mean by that? Some days are literally one day at a time, and others are easier.
Quality. When I look at quality, I can say, yeah, okay, I'm not involved in my inner circle today. I'm not doing the things that I shouldn't be doing. But what does my quality look like? In other words, where is my headspace at in any given day? Do I use the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors cycle to analyze what's going on in my day? If I'm having a tough day, have I reached out? And so the quality of my recovery needs to be such that I have everything in place to ensure that I have a good day. Again, granted, not every day is going to be a good day, but I can work at making it better. The option or the choice is that if I don't choose to do that, if I don't reach out, if I don't give some serious thought to some prayer and meditation, if I don't involve my higher power, I'm at risk of acting out. And my friend's been there, done that. Justin, you mentioned earlier that I took a sabbatical and excuse me, and took a vacation away from recovery. For some of the people on this call today who know me, I've been in recovery for 3 years. I took that sabbatical, went out there, did some field research. And so I woke up one morning and discovered that as I looked out my bedroom window, that my bedroom window had bars on it. So I was a guest of the federal government for 6 years. So I had 3 hots and a cot. And, if that isn't a wake-up call, I don't know what is. And so I said to myself, Al, what is the quality of your life? Your addiction has brought you to prison. How much lower can you go? Well, I probably could have committed suicide, but I didn't. And so I'm here today to say the program works. There is great quality to the things that we do if we will simply incorporate the 12 steps and work them.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing a little bit more of your experience there. Appreciate your willingness to share that. All right. Another question came in from Sam. Sam asks, Al, how often do you go back through all 12 steps in sequence or formally?
Well, one of the great things about working with sponsees is that I'm always involved in the 12 steps, and they're all at various stages. I'm a big believer of A Gentle Path Through the 12 Steps. It's a book, obviously, for any addiction at all, written by Patrick Carnes, of whom I'm a great fan. And so all of my sponsees work in that book. So depending on where they are, I'm working along with them. In terms of my own personal recovery, I like to review them periodically. I still have my original copy of A Gentle Path Through the 12 Steps that I worked. And I like to look at it periodically to see what my answers were and if they're still valid or if there's things that I need to change. So very definitely there are aspects of the 12 steps that I still personally work because I need to. That's how I stay sober.
Stress and trauma happen inside of the body, which means we can heal them through the body. My name is Luis Mojica. I'm a somatic therapist, nutritionist, and host of the Holistic Life Navigation podcast. Join me each week as I teach you how to release stress and trauma through listening to your body, using nutrition, somatic experiencing, and other holistic practices. You can listen at the Holistic Life Navigation podcast or at holisticlifenavigation.com.
Thank you. And as you mention resources and different things, I make note of those resources and I put them in the show notes of the podcast so that if anybody has interest, they can go look those up. So thank you for sharing those resources. And a question I have for you from your share, I loved those questions that you posted or that you posed. One of them being being captivated by an idea to which the future belongs. Al, do you currently have one of those ideas that you are captivated by that you are working towards in your own life?
I do. I'm captivated by the possibility and the idea that there is life beyond recovery, and deciding what that is and what it looks like is important to me. I realize that I can't stay put in one place. I can't, as my mother says, if you rest, you rust. So I can't afford to do that. I need to keep moving my recovery ahead. So the idea that I can make myself as available as possible, I think keeps my recovery moving forward. Periodically, I'll get an email from the good folks at Sex Addicts Anonymous, and it'll talk about a new group that's being formed, and I'll get involved. And so, for instance, I'm involved out of Metro DC in a sponsors roundtable. It's a gathering of sponsors who discuss how we handle a particular step with our sponsees. And so I'm involved in that for some time. They're not doing it now, but out of Southern California, they were doing some speaker meetings that were tremendously powerful, and I participated in those. The International Communications Committee of Sex Addicts Anonymous is another committee that I'm not involved in now, but have been for several years to push things ahead. I think that recovery programs, relatively speaking, some of them are fairly new. I think Sex Addicts Anonymous has been around since 1967, but it's an idea to which I was captivated. Hey, I can get over this sex addiction, and here's how I can do it. Hey, I can go to a meeting. I can hear people. If you're an alcoholic, as I was at one point in time, I was a bout drinker, so I wasn't a fall down brown bag downtown guy, but nevertheless, I had a problem with drinking, so I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. So, when you have that problem, you can kind of put your arm around your buddy and say, let's go and get blasted. But when you're a sex addict, can you put your arm around your buddy and say, I want to come to my house and look at kiddie porn? So ours is, we who are sex addicts, it's a very secret addiction, very, very much so. I mean, we just don't share that kind of information. Here's an idea. Go to a meeting and share your stuff. I was surprised. People hugged me. People asked for my phone number. People said, keep coming back. They didn't take me out and lynch me in the tree in front of the church. So, here's an idea to which I have been captivated, and that's the recovery program that I work in. And as I say, I'm currently doing maintenance programs with our community of faith, and those two are an idea. We're in the process of revising the manual for that program, and I was very grateful to be a participant in that. And so the idea, again, is reblossoming out of this program that the church has. And so, yeah, I like new ideas.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing those. So, you mentioned that you've been sober from alcohol since 1974. What are the similarities and differences maybe of the programs you worked back then in AA and how you do things now and have over the last, handful of years that you've been doing things in SAA and in ARP?
Sorry, I had a bit of trouble hearing the end of that.
Oh, so yeah, I apologize. So the end of it was, what are some of the similarities and differences between the program you worked in AA and the program you work now or have worked over the last several years in SAA and in ARP?
I don't know that there's a lot of differences in them. I mean, obviously, we're dealing with a different addiction, and I have always said this, that it doesn't matter what the addiction is. The acting out behaviors are an outward manifestation of an inner problem. and it's the inner problem that we have to deal with. And I kind of remember in AA, they jokingly say, why isn't one of the 12 steps? So I wasn't so sure that I needed to know why I was drinking, but in fact, I did. So it's interesting when I came into recovery as a recovering sex addict and discovered that in step 4, answering the question why, we do step 1, then we get to step 4 and say, why did I do these things? Dr. Phil says, what were you thinking? And I said that to myself, what were you thinking? So, it was a little bit different. And of course, my experience was such that I really needed to get very serious about my recovery work now. But the 12 steps are the 12 steps. And I think it depends on how prepared we are and how we approach it. And definitely, I'm huge on sponsors. It really depends on having a really good sponsor. And I have always said, don't look for a sponsor, listen for one. And I've been blessed over the years. My father was my longest sponsor. He's now since passed. And I have other sponsors. I have a program sponsor and a spiritual sponsor. My spiritual sponsor deals with my spirituality and the inner me, the inner child, so to speak. And so I'm grateful to have still a sponsor. Excuse me. I don't know whether Steve is on the call today. I think he is, but I like one of his Steve-isms. He said it takes as long to walk out of the forest as it did to walk in. So. Yeah, lots of work. The programs are obviously very similar. The only difference is, what are you recovering from today?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You just shared something that piqued my interest. You said your actual father was your sponsor for a long time. How did that work out with a family member being your sponsor? Is that something you would recommend to most people?
I'll try and give you the thumbnail here. I was born during the Second World War. My father was in the Navy during the Second World War. When he came home at the end of the war, my parents divorced. Things just didn't work out while he was gone. And so I've heard both my parents have passed, but I've heard my mother's story and I've heard my dad's story, and somewhere in between lies the truth sort of thing, But in any event, my parents divorced when I was 2. My dad went on to Vancouver, remarried, had a family. And so I never did have any contact with him. In my teen years, I wrote to him a couple of times because I knew where he worked and I didn't get any response. So I just assumed that, either he's gotten on with his life or he just doesn't want to have anything to do with this kid that he never knew anyway because he was busy on the East Coast serving on corvettes. So I didn't pursue it much from there. And I'm grateful to my mother because my mother did not prejudice me. We talked in generalities over the years about what had happened. So I'm 30 years old. I'm remarried for the second time. My daughter has just been born. And I got a letter in the mail, a very brief letter that said, "Hi, I'm your dad. I don't know whether you want to have anything to do with me or not, but here's my phone number and here's my address." Well, again, I'll try not to be emotional. I jumped on that one. I wanted to know my dad so badly. And so I gave him a call. So as things unfolded and I got to know him, and he lived in BC, and of course I'm here in Alberta. So we arranged to get together to do a little bit of camping and to get to know each other. And he said, Al, when I wrote that letter to you, he said, I was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, I was such a serious alcoholic that I couldn't drive to 7-Eleven without a drink between my knees. And so he said, when I wrote the letter, I was doing step 8. And my sponsor said to me, Chess, you've got a son out there that you've ignored for 30 years. Do you think you owe him an amend? So he wrote the letter, and the rest was history. And so as I got to know my dad, I said, Dad, I think I have a problem. Can you help me with it? My father was Mr. AA in BC. For a couple of years, he was the whatever from the New York office. He went to all the roundups. He was a frequent speaker and just a great all-around guy. So more times than not, he said, Al, don't take yourself too damn seriously. So that worked out really well. And he was my sponsor until he passed. And then, I came up with a new sponsor, and that's another story probably for another day.
Very good. But so on that note, would you recommend that somebody would typically seek out the sponsor from a family member, like father or spouse or anything like that? Is that something you would ever recommend?
Well, I suppose there's some pros and cons to it. When you look for a sponsor and you listen for a sponsor, you might be getting the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, or the chancellor from the university. Who knows? We can only go on the basis of the experience that our sponsor has had. And so choosing a sponsor, I think, needs to be done with a great deal of caution. And I think we've all probably gotten into that situation where we think, oh, gosh, I can't fire a sponsor. I can't change sponsors. I have to be loyal. I have to be faithful. And I've always said, hey, we're talking my sobriety here. I need somebody that can support me, that can mentor me, that can guide me. I've always said that, recovery is like giving instructions to a blind guy in a minefield. And so I need all the help I can get to get through my addiction. When it comes to being a family member, I appreciate that I hadn't known my father for 30 years. And so when we first met, he was a stranger to me. I knew nothing about him. And so as time progressed, obviously, we got to know each other. And so because we lived in two different provinces, we'd get together at least once a year, spend some time camping. He'd bring my stepmother, and I'd bring my wife and my daughter, and we'd have a good time together. And through the course of that time that we were camping together, my father and I would take some alone time to kind of bond as father and son and as sponsor and sponsee. So my personal, to answer your question, that's a long answer, isn't it? To answer your question, I do go on, just ask my friends. I think we have to be careful about who we select as a sponsor. I think that if a family member is appropriate, go for it. I'm more inclined to say, no, we need somebody who's not invested and attached in our personal lives so that they can be objective. And I think, excuse me, that's one of the big things about being a sponsor. A sponsor has to be objective in dealing with helping you to get through your recovery. So it's not impossible. In my case, it happened until my father passed, but it's certainly worth considering is this a good thing or is it not?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think I tend to follow that same thinking that an immediate family member may not be the best choice because of that objectivity and being able to call me on my garbage when I'm being dishonest without, worrying about, what does this do to our relationship?
I was going to say, I don't know about you, but probably most of my family and friends were my enablers and codependents. They're the people that looked the other way when I was doing my stuff. They didn't know what I was doing, but they had an idea.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. Very good. I love how you brought up this story with the young woman who graduated high school and you called it the new horizon, new challenge, and new beginning each day. How do you keep that fresh? I mean, I talked to some people who after, a year or after 5 years or someone after 15 or 20 years, recovery is just getting stale. It's the same old thing over and over again. How do you keep that new horizon, that new challenge, and that new beginning fresh for you?
Well, I just gave you 5 questions on how I do that. But seriously, I'm still a possibility thinker. One of the things that saves me from going back is when I can, perhaps be triggered or something pops up on TV, I can take that moment and say, what are the possibilities here? I can choose to act or I can choose to react. Each of us will have, our technique of dealing with issues when we're triggered so that we don't go back. One of the things I like to look at is telling myself, whoa, wait a minute. What are the possibilities here? I have some choices. What is the choice that I'll make today? So it takes a while to kind of absorb this concept of being a possibility thinker, but it's amazing when you can get your head wrapped around it, where you just take that, we talk about addiction. There's that split second when we could make the decision not to act out. And so being a possibility thinker, it's that same thing. I mean, there are still things out there that are triggering for me. I have a plan. I know how to handle them now, which is different. Before I used to say, hey, in for a penny, in for a pound. But it's different now. So I have that split second when I can be a possibility thinker and say, what are the possibilities here? The possibility is that I can make a choice. I can go back or I can maintain my recovery. What's the choice going to be?
Yeah, thank you so much. And you mentioned that self-management plan, that relapse prevention plan. Do you use any sort of template or anything like that in helping others develop that? Or is that just something you say, hey, let's ask some questions and answer some questions? Walk us through that process just a little bit, if you don't mind.
Well, let me tell you some secrets here. I have 3 university degrees, one of which is a master's. My undergraduate degree is in behavioral psychology. So during the course of my 6 years as a guest of the government, of course, there are lots of programs available. They sent me off to the regional psychiatric center in the next province, and I'm not crazy. I've been tested. So I'm not obsessive. I don't have obsessive compulsive disorder, but I am OC. I've been tested. But anyway, long story short, I was in a high intensity sex offender program while I was there. It's all built around cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's my thing. That's my wheelhouse, is cognitive behavioral therapy. So while I was there for 8 months. The program was 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Morning was group therapy, afternoon was programs. And so one of the things that I had to develop while I was there was a self-management plan that said, okay, when you get out of prison, I mean, you've committed a crime here, a sexual crime. What is your plan? How are you going to stay away from that stuff? So I had to flesh out a plan. And so many of us, of course, call it a relapse prevention plan. I call it a self-management plan. In other words, how do I manage myself from day to day so that I make sure that I don't go back? And so do I have a template? Well, what I do share with my sponsees is that I have my own personal self-management plan. And I haven't developed a generic kind of, fill in the blanks type thing that I can send out to people, but I do send a copy of mine and I say, hey, I'm putting it out here. This is my stuff, this is how I manage my life. So you use that template and start filling it in with what works for you. So there's kind of some value added exercises that I give my sponsees. One is values, attitudes, and beliefs. And, I part of having a philosophy fit for yourself to know, and a philosophy fit to live by. What are your values, attitudes, and beliefs? I had them before I became an alcoholic or before I became a sex addict. What happened to my values, attitudes, and beliefs? Well, it's a paper and pencil exercise, and I write out my values, my attitudes, and my beliefs. And so, you can call it stinking thinking if you like, but then the question becomes, okay, here I am in recovery. I've been in recovery for a while. Let's revisit this. Let's look at my values, attitudes, and beliefs. What are they now? What do I value most in life? What do I believe? What is my attitude about any given thing? And it's a good thing, like I say, to write it out and keep it, wherever. And it's a good thing to revisit. So it's one of the exercises that I give my sponsees as well. I give them the self-management plan, values, attitudes, and beliefs. Thoughts, feelings, and behaviors is another one that I'm big on. It's all cognitive behavioral therapy, and we've heard it probably under a myriad of different labels in recovery. We've probably heard people talk about it, but I stole them all. I make no apology for plagiarizing anything at all. Anybody that's on my morning blogs know that I do that. So I'm a thief of good ideas. And so those are the things that are value added when I work with sponsees. It's in addition to the work that they do in the Gentle Path.
A higher consumption of vegetables may cut your odds of developing depression by as much as 62%. An American Cancer Society study found that women who sit for more than 6 hours a day have a 40% higher death rate. Hi, My name is Maya Acosta, and I'm a health and wellness educator and host of the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast. Join me and the amazing people that I get to talk to as I set out to learn how to improve our quality of life and increase our longevity. You can listen at the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast or at healthylifestylesolutions.org.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right. We have another question that came in from our audience. This is from Ryan. Ryan says, Al, thank you for sharing your experience, faith, and hope. On the subject of sponsors, what would you recommend doing to help encourage members in a fellowship, such as ARP or any other fellowship, maybe individual meeting that does not historically encourage formal sponsorship, to look for and listen for a sponsor without sounding like you are full of yourself or like you want to shove it down their throats?
Okay. Well, as I mentioned, in my community of faith, we have a recovery program. One of the shifts that's being made in the program as they revise it is great emphasis now on having a sponsor. Just virtually everything in that program, and it's based on the 12 steps, but almost at every turn they talk about a sponsor. And so I'm big on sponsors. I say, if you're somebody in recovery and you're doing this on your own, you're somewhat akin to the guy that goes to court and represents himself. He has a fool for a client. So, we really need the experience of others to help us get through this program. And so listening for a sponsor, listen for somebody who has something that you want, something that you think you need, something that you say that, the penny drops and you say, wow, this guy's talking about me. He's talking about the stuff that I've done. Maybe he's got some ideas about how I can overcome this. So I think it's important to definitely listen for a sponsor. Now, refresh my memory. Did I miss the gist of something there? I think I did.
So the last part was bringing that up without sounding like you're full of yourself or like you want to shove it down their throats, shove the idea of sponsorship down their throats.
Oh, listen, if you're in recovery and you haven't learned humility, yeah, it's I love to answer questions. I'm not a preachy kind of guy that says you shoulda, woulda, coulda, that's not my style. I'm there to put my arm around somebody and say, my friend, how can I help? And I'm a Sunday go-to-meeting guy, so I'm going to talk about the compassion of the Savior for a second. I have great compassion for people who are struggling with addiction, whatever that addiction looks like. Great compassion, because I've been there. I've done that. Hey, I've done stuff in sex addiction that would curl your hair. A lot of people, when they recover from sex addiction, pornography and masturbation are the entry-level things. And when I first interview somebody and they say, well, I'm struggling with pornography, and I say, well, how about masturbation? Yeah, well, yeah. So I know where there's smoke, there's fire. There's something else going on. And that was the case for me. I think about the only thing that I haven't done in sex addiction is the rubber rooms and whips and chains. I've had a mistress. I've belonged to a swingers club. I've done the gamut of things in there. And so listening for somebody who has something that I want is incredibly important. There's lots of people out there that have great experience, great strength, great hope, but somebody who has something that I want is important. And so I need to know what my wants are up front.
All right. Thank you so much. So before we wrap this up, Al, do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us and the audience out here that will be listening?
Have you got another hour?
We've got some time. We got 5 minutes. What do you got?
No, I'm pulling your leg.
Yeah.
Words of wisdom. I just, there's so many directions that somebody can go with that kind of a question. I just hope, I hope and pray for the person who's trying to find recovery every day. There was a period of 5 years that it's a historical building in downtown Calgary. It's Central United Church, big old sandstone building. And it's not my particular faith, but in any event, in the evenings, they have what they call a life recovery service. And basically, it's an AA meeting with, some good old singing involved and a bit of scripture here and there, and sometimes communion and other things. And so because it's an inner city ministry, they minister to the homeless and the addicted. Let me tell you, these are the kinds of people back in the day. I was a middle-class snob. I was a professional back in the day. These folks downtown were people, I wouldn't pee on their head if their hair was on fire. So I I was part of another program, and they said, hey, come on down to Central United. We think maybe you might enjoy the meetings that are being had there. And so I did that. I wound up being part of the prayer team. So after the meeting, I and my team, there were 3 of us, we'd go to a side sanctuary, and we would sit and talk and pray with, and this is emotional too, and pray for these people who are out on the street. Calgary is a city of 1.4 million people. We have a large homeless problem in this city. I have come to love and appreciate those people because some of the things that they are struggling with are absolutely unbelievable. And by and large, they're all addicted either to alcohol or drugs particularly. And some of them are just struggling with just eking out an existence from day to day. So I gained a great appreciation for the blessings that I have. That I have food in my stomach, I have a roof over my head, I have a place to sleep. And that I truly am blessed in recovery. I really am, I count my blessings every day that my experience, even up until recently, I've had the experience where some people, either in word or in deed, in essence said, Al, I believe in you. I know you can do this. And as I think about it, isn't that what we need in recovery? We need somebody to walk beside us to say, I know you can do this. I believe in you. And that's what I really wanted, was somebody to believe in me. And that's what so many people on the street are hoping. I can't buy them a car. I can't buy them a condo. I can buy them a meal. But giving them a little bit of hope and telling them that I believe in them. Somebody believed in me, and I recovered. Somebody believed in me, and I got out of prison. Somebody believed in me, and I got on with my life. And so I've become a useful, productive member of society who has something to give. So I traded addictions. I'm not a sex addict anymore. My new addiction is recovery.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Al. We had 2 last-second questions come in, and I think they're both pretty quick ones. So I'm going to ask them. First one is from Ben. If I'm considering switching sponsors, should I get another sponsor first before leaving the first one?
There's a couple of directions you can go on that one. Just let me quickly say that if you're going to change, a true sponsor should have no problem, should not be offended by your choice. They realize that your needs come first. And I always say that the person with the greatest need comes first. That's me. I'm the addict. I have needs. And so a true sponsor would not be offended if you're going to change sponsors. I would recommend that where possible, you have a sponsor in place because, I don't know about you, but my addiction doesn't take a day off. I personally cannot be without guidance. I mean, I have some great friends in recovery. I have one of my sponsees is about 10 years now sober. get a text message from him every morning. Have done for 10 years. We still text each other. One of my guys I know is on the call today. We're looking at about 5 years down the road. He's my best friend. When I'm in trouble, I can reach out. I don't discern, is he a sponsee? Is he a sponsee? What is he? He's a friend in recovery, somebody I can talk to. And I think that's the key, that we need to reach out. And in terms of changing sponsors, look after yourself first.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's some wise words there. All right. The last question is from Mary. Mary says, what's the best treatment center for sex addiction? I don't know if this is something you have any experience in or expertise in, but that's the question for you.
Well, there's lots of them around. The best one, my recommendation, I've already said it. I'm a big fan of Patrick Carnes. He has the Meadows. It's pricey. The Meadows, Patrick's pretty much retired now, but his daughter is Stephanie Carnes. She's a PhD. She wrote a book called Mending a Shattered Heart. If anybody wants to know what they did to somebody else, read Mending a Shattered Heart. It's the story from the other side of the fence. And I'll tell you, it's recommended reading for my sponsees, because we say, oh yeah, well, we've harmed some people. Describe that. Read the book, and you'll find out what harm looks like. You'll find out that the biggest thing is the word betrayal. It's really interesting. And I've heard stories from the other side of the fence where spouses and others have talked about that sense of betrayal that came as a result of our addiction. So, Mending a Shattered Heart is a great book. But in any event, the Meadows. But like I say, there are lots of programs out there. Just one quick thought. People who are going to therapists are wanting to know, how should I go to see a therapist? My recommendation is twofold. Number one, ask your therapist if they're a recovering addict. People say, I can't ask that of a therapist. Well, yes, you can. You're paying the bill. You're hiring the professional to work for you. You want to know if he or she is a recovering addict, because do they know what they're talking about, or do they have a head full of book knowledge? The other one, in my case, certainly for sex addiction, I ask them, are you a CSAT, Certified Sex Addiction Therapist, CSAT? And that's important. I mean, when the addicted speak to the non-addicted, they're speaking a foreign language. I want to talk to somebody that knows what I'm talking about, and I'm footing the bill. So Patrick Carnes probably wouldn't admit to this, but if you are involved in SAA and you read the Green Book, the first story in the Green Book is 11 pages long. It's Patrick's story. He also was a sex addict. That's one of the reasons why he started SAA. So I like hanging around with recovering sex addicts, because that's my thing. I mean, I can send you down to Clarisholm, south of Calgary here, if you want to recover from alcohol. There's lots of places around. Fresh Start is right in Calgary. It's a 30-bed treatment facility. So, but in terms of sex addiction, the Meadows, if you can afford it. Tiger Woods went there. Last I understood, it's about $50,000 US. It's a 2-month inpatient program.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. And like I said, those resources that you're mentioning, I will put in the show notes of the podcast meeting. So anybody who's listening in podcast will be able to go in there and find those links and that information. Thank you again, Al. That was a great RECO12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your questions, or if you have other questions, please go to RECO12.com and join in our community there on the website. And we also have a private Facebook group, and you can ask and answer questions there that may come up from these meetings. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you have not yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts, please go do so now. It's a great way to work your 12th step and help us work our 12th step in sharing this message with others. Next week, we will be hearing from Lids G, whose topic will be, We Do Recover from Violence and Are Able to Laugh Again. Lids has been on RECO12 once before and back in meeting number 72, and I look forward to hearing from her again next week. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the we version of the Serenity Prayer that Al has chosen. Go ahead, Al.
Thank you. Who do we believe in? God. Grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everybody. Keep coming back and keep trudging this happy road with me. Work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of